What do you wish for? If you could have one wish granted, what would it be? What do you wish for? Maybe I'm the only person in this room who has given this quite a bit of thought, but I've been thinking about this for almost as long as I can possibly remember. I remember as a little kid, as a preteen, I would wrestle with what would I want if I could have anything I wished for. And this was encouraged in me by things that would happen in my life, particularly something that would happen every year, just about this time. I am of a certain age that I remember getting in the mail a catalog just before Christmas, around the beginning of November, and it was the Sears Christmas catalog. And I would go through the Sears Christmas catalog for weeks, just page by page, circling and identifying and picking out exactly the right things that I wished for. In fact, the Sears catalog was called the Wish Book. I was dysfunctional enough in my family that my brother and my sister and I would have a contest to see who could claim the most interesting gifts. We'd open the page in the book and you have to put your finger on the gift that you wanted. And my sister always knew the gift that I wanted. She would put her finger on the gift that I wanted. And then I would put my finger on the gift that she wanted. And then my brother would always get the gift he wanted because we were always fighting over which gift we wanted. I was encouraged from the time I was a child to wish for things. Remember the story of Aladdin and his magic lamp? Did you ever hear that story where Aladdin finds a lamp and he rubs it and the genie comes out and the genie says, "I will grant you 3 wishes." And I remember very early on in my life, I was thinking, how could I cram as much as possible into just one wish, into my first wish? So I invented kind of a run-on sentence wish. I wish that I had a chateau in France with a garage full of Ferraris and the world's greatest wine cellar with a view of the Mediterranean Sea in which my yacht was anchored. And behind my mansion was an airstrip where my Learjet or my Gulfstream G700 was waiting for me to get on board so I could fly to one of my fabulous penthouse apartments in one of the great cities of the world, or perhaps to my ski lodge in Aspen or Stad or somewhere. And that was one wish, because it was all commas and conjunctions and everything. And I thought, I have this hardwired. I know what you might be thinking. You might be thinking, Dave, you materialistic, hedonistic jerk. Really? That's what you get 3 wishes? Or you get one great wish and that's what you wish for? No. I would wish for world peace that came from my garage full of Ferraris. Something like that. But what would you wish? And before you think that's an outrageous notion, I think there's something in us. Something about our desires, our appetites, our passions, our ambitions that's good. It's natural. And wishing for things, hoping for things, dreaming about things. It's normal and natural. And before you think that story of wishes coming true is just a fairy tale, there's actually a story in the Bible about it happening. It's in 1 Kings chapter 3. In 1 Kings chapter 3, there was a king of Israel. His name was Solomon. And in 1 Kings 3, Solomon has a dream. And in his dream, God speaks to him. And God says, I will grant you whatever you ask for. And Solomon asked for wisdom. Of all the things that he could ask for, he asked for wisdom. Wisdom so that he could be a great king, so that he could understand how to lead God's people well. The story in 1 Kings chapter 3 says that God was pleased with Solomon's request. And he was thankful and he was glad that Solomon did not ask for long life or for wealth or for the death of his enemies. And God said, I will give you the wisdom that you asked for. Sounds noble, doesn't it? But what is wisdom? What does it mean to want wisdom? was 6 weeks ago that we began a study that was inspired by a couple of authors. One was a professor at New York University. He was a professor of the history of religious literature. His name was James P. Carse. And in 1986, James Carse wrote a book called Finite and Infinite Games. And I don't recommend that you read it because it is boring. It is a tough read. But 33 years later, a motivational business speaker named Simon Sinek picked up on Carse's idea and published a book called The Infinite Game. It's much more readable, but both of them are talking about the same thing. They're saying that in life, we are aware of the rules of finite games like baseball, football, basketball. They have definite rules. They have a way of keeping score. But outside of those games, in life itself, we are playing an infinite game. And an infinite game has different rules. In an infinite game, there aren't easy ways to determine winning or losing. I mean, how do you win marriage? How do you win parenting? How do you win a career? How do you win in life? And they suggest that in the infinite game, the key is staying in the game. But I want to know how to win. I want to know how to win in this infinite game. So we turned to the wisdom of the man who asked God, and God granted him wisdom. We turned to the wisdom of Solomon. See, Solomon is credited with writing or editing 3 books in the Bible. One of them is the book of Proverbs. The other is the book called Song of Solomon. And the third one is the book of Ecclesiastes. And we've been looking at one sample from the book of Proverbs, Proverbs chapter 3. And over the last 6 weeks, we've been mining this writing from the wisest man, perhaps, who ever lived, and saying, how do we win at life? And I suggested from this study that there are multiple ways for us to win at life. One way, for example, is through mentoring. We win in life by being and having a mentor. Mentoring is winning. Another way we win at life is by living heroically, living sacrificially, living a life of service that makes others' lives better. Living sacrificially, sacrificing is winning. We then suggested that trusting is winning. Trusting in others, trusting in ourselves, but most of all, trusting in God is winning. We then suggested that living is winning. Being fully present, grabbing life by the shirt collar and shaking it for all it's worth. Really living is winning. We then suggested that giving, generosity, making the lives of others better through our stewardship of our time and our talent and our treasure. Giving is winning. And last week, Stephanie Rollins shared with us the idea that surrendering, not quitting, but surrendering is winning. But today I want to suggest that this section we've been studying, in verses 13 to 18, comes to a conclusion by suggesting that wisdom is winning. But what does that mean? What is wisdom? Where do we find it? And how do we know we've got it if we do find it? How do we know it if we see it? And where can we seek it? I want to answer these questions today. Today I want to answer the question of how do we seek wisdom? And will we know it if we see it? But before we investigate that, I want to take a moment and pray. Would you pray with me? Father in heaven, I would ask that the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart would be pleasing in your sight. That you would use your words spoken by your servant, anointed by your Spirit, to remind us, to challenge us, to passionately seek, and to know it when we see wisdom. Pray that for myself, for my family, for all of us here. For I ask that in Jesus' name. Amen. So what is wisdom? Well, wisdom is not the same as intelligence. Being smart is not the same as being wise. I have known some very smart people who have done some very unwise things, who have made some very unwise choices. Being intelligent, having knowledge, is not the same as being wise. You can't go to a school and get a degree in, in wisdom. There are no classes you can take, no checklists for once you check all the boxes, you will be wise. We can gain knowledge. Knowledge is a thing. Knowledge and information and data and the empirical method are things, but wisdom is not a thing. Now, if that's what wisdom isn't, what is wisdom? Well, wisdom is something that has been present in every culture throughout the history of human civilization. People have honored the idea of wisdom. 6,000 years ago, the Jewish people identified wisdom as skill in living. Taking that knowledge and that information and the data about life and knowing how to use it, knowing how to apply it. Skill at living is the idea, the Hebrew idea of wisdom. And this is the idea that is seated in Proverbs chapter 3 because wisdom is not a thing. Wisdom, you see, is a pursuit. It is a process. It is a journey. Wisdom is a quest. Think of wisdom as true north. And we're on a journey. And if I seek wisdom, I will know it when I see it. And I'm always pursuing it. This is what is laid out in these 6 verses in Proverbs chapter 3, verses 16 to 18. In Proverbs chapter 3, verse 16, it says, "Blessed are those who find," as in you didn't have it and you found it, "wisdom. Those who gain understanding. For she is more profitable than silver, and she yields better return on your investment than gold. She is more precious than rubies. Nothing you can possibly desire compares with wisdom. Long life is in her right hand, and in her left hand are riches and honor. Her ways are pleasant ways, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to those who take hold of her. To those who hold her fast will be blessed." In these 6 verses, I want to suggest that it shows us the importance of seeking wisdom and the importance of seeing wisdom. We seek wisdom. We're supposed to seek wisdom. What does it say there in verses 13, 14, and 15? It says, "Blessed are those who find wisdom, those who gain understanding. For she is more profitable than silver. She yields a better return than gold. She is more precious than rubies. Nothing you can desire compares with her." What's the first thing you notice about those 3 verses? About wisdom in those 3 verses? Well, if you're paying attention, you'll notice that it refers to wisdom as feminine, as a female. Wisdom is a she. Now, scholars for years have debated, why is this? Why is wisdom referred to as feminine here in Proverbs chapter 3? And they've come up with a lot of rationale, a lot of reasons, and most of them are just dumb. Most of them are stupid, and you don't want to know them. But the most common one, and the easiest one, the most obvious one, is why is wisdom referred to in the feminine? Well, it's obvious, right? I mean, we can conduct a survey here, and you will validate the obviousness of why wisdom is referred to as feminine. And it's because men are idiots. Right? Yeah, more than 50% of you are going, "Oh, that's absolutely right." And people have actually suggested this is why the wisdom is referred to in the feminine. Because none of us are surprised when men do stupid things. When women do stupid things, it's kind of shocking to us. Now, there have been other theories about why this is in the feminine that I think are more substantial, because that's kind of snarky, isn't it? It's kind of pejorative to say that women is or wisdom is the exclusive prerogative of women, because we know the inverse isn't true. Stupidity is not gender specific. Both men and women can do stupid things. We're just surprised when women do it. When men do it, we're like, of course. But there's another reason why it's probably in the feminine, and it has to do with beauty. It has to do with the nature of art. Proverbs chapter 3 is a father talking to a son. It is a father imparting wisdom to a son, and it would be natural for the father to equate wisdom to the female form, to the beauty and what a young boy would feel in his attraction to a woman. And so it's this idea that wisdom is beautiful. That wisdom has an attraction in the same way that beautiful things do. You see, the art, if wisdom is art, then art is subjective. Art is circumstantial. Something can be wise in one situation. It's wise for me to do this, but in another situation, it's very unwise for me to do that. Wisdom is circumstantial, subjective. It's like beauty. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So I think he's equating this idea that wisdom is an art, not a science. Wisdom is like beauty. It is determined by the beholder. But there's a third thing that I think why perhaps this is why wisdom is referred to in the feminine, and that has to do with, I think wisdom is maternal. I think wisdom is life-giving. And there is a prerogative that is exclusively feminine, and that is the ability to contain within your own body another life. That is the exclusive prerogative of the feminine or the female gender. It is the ability to nurture and to give life, and that's what wisdom is. Wisdom is maternal. It is life-giving. It is nurturing. But however you understand it, the encouragement is to have a passion in pursuing wisdom, to have an affection for it, to have a lust for wisdom. And you see, we have a tendency to think that we are victims of our passions, that we are not in control of our feelings. Have you ever heard anyone say, I can't help it, but I feel this way. I can't help it. Yeah, you can. It doesn't mean that you don't feel things. It means that you process those things that you set your affections on. We may not be able to help how we feel, but we can choose what we pursue. We can choose what we are passionate about, and we are to choose carefully. And if we choose wisdom, we are to pursue it with all passion. What does it say? What is it, verse 13, verse 15, the end of verse 15? Nothing you can be passionate about, nothing you can desire can even begin to compare with the value of wisdom. We are to seek it, to be passionate about it. But we can also know it when we see it. We can know wisdom when we see wisdom. Verses 16 and 17 and 18. In verse 16, it says, long life is in her right hand, and in her left hand are riches and honor. For her ways are pleasant ways, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to those who take hold of her. Those who hold her fast will be blessed. This is a poetic description of what wisdom looks like. And we see it in three ways. We know it when we see it in experience. We know wisdom when we see it in experience. In verse 16, it says, long life is in her right hand. You know where you see wisdom? You see wisdom in people who have been there and done that. In people who have paid the admission price and they've seen the show. They have paid the tuition in the school of hard knocks. They've been through life before. Every one of us, no matter what your age is, we should always have people who we are listening to, who we are looking to, who have been there and done that. People who have experienced life. We see wisdom in experience. We know it when we see it in experience because of the long life that people have lived, the wisdom that is accumulated over time. Doesn't matter how old you are, there is always someone who's a few steps down the road from where you are. Someone who has gone down a path you never imagined that you would have to go down. And that's where we find wisdom, in that experience. One of the things that I'm most proud of here at Riverbend is the generational diversity that we have. It used to be true. I don't know if it's still true post-pandemic, but pre-pandemic, 3 or 4 years ago, the Riverbend population, we not only had hundreds of young children and babies in our congregation, we had over 100 people who were active and a regular part of the Riverbend family who were over 90 years of age. That's wisdom. That's just a boatload of wisdom that can share with you how life unfolds. People who have bought the ticket and ridden the ride. And they can say, this is how it goes down. But it's not just time. It's people who've had vast experience, who have accomplished things and are successful at things. In verse 16, it says, not only is long life in her right hand, in her left hand are riches and honor. You can learn as much from an 18-year-old who has had success, who has perhaps disciplined their life or discovered a new thing. We can learn from those who have accomplished something, who have pressed into something, who have succeeded. Riches and honor. Honor is one of my favorite Hebrew words. It's the word kabed. And the etymology of it, the ancient Semitic origin of the word kabed, was the Semitic word for liver. When they pulled the liver out of an animal that they were butchering, they noticed that the liver was the heaviest organ. And so the word kabed, which meant liver, came to mean, it evolved etymologically to mean heavy. And then it evolved in a metaphorical sense to mean like weight of character, weight of influence. A person with honor was a person who was kabed, a person who would be that person. You ever been in a meeting where people are yelling at each other and they're fighting and they're disagreeing, and there's somebody who just sits there and waits, and then when it all calms down, they say something that's so profound, you're kind of like, why didn't you say that at the beginning? So we could have saved 2 hours of arguing, but that's heaviness, that's the weightiness, that's the liver. They're putting the liver on the table. It is the kabed. And we learn from that wisdom, that experience. We can know wisdom when we see it in experience. We can know wisdom when we see it in compromise. Do you realize the skill it takes to be a good artist of compromise, good negotiator? A person who can establish an agreement between two very disagreeable people and have both of them think that they won. Have each one walk away thinking they got the better end of the deal. Have you ever known anyone who had that skill? There's an art to compromise. It's described here in verse 17. It says, for her ways are pleasant ways. The word pleasant there is the word naim, and it means delightful. It's the idea that this is a person who knows how to put a smile on your face, who knows how to leave you after a conversation with this sense of feeling good about yourself. The word naim is translated in Proverbs chapter 16, verse 24, as gracious. Gracious like the honey from a honeycomb. It's sweet and it's healing to the bones. You know where you see wisdom? You see wisdom in compromise. People of grace. People who can say yes and, or think about this. People who are peacemakers. And it says that all her ways are peace. All her ways are shalom. Shalom is a ubiquitous word in Hebrew. It's used for hello and it's used for goodbye. It's used for bless you and it's used for have a nice day. It is a word that has all kind of application, but its root meaning is wholeness or completeness. When you say shalom to someone, you're saying, I want you to be well. I want you to be whole. I want you to be full. All of the ways that we see wisdom are, wisdom is that one who is the way that things become whole. It has this idea of safety, of security, without want. That's the beauty of wisdom. We know it when we see it in the art of compromise, in that sense of peace, that sense of wholeness, that sense of safety, that sense of completeness. We know wisdom when we see that. We know it when we see it in experience. We know it when we see it in compromise. And thirdly, we know it when we see it in perseverance. Verse 18, the last verse of this section, says that wisdom is a tree of life. And those who take hold of her and those who hold her fast will be blessed. Compares wisdom to a tree. You ever sat down and watched a tree grow? You ever do that? It's kind of a waste of time, isn't it? Because you just sit there. You could sit there for a week. You could sit there for a month. You may not see the thing change at all. I mean, a fruit tree, you might see the things, but if you sat there for a month, you'd have to sit there for 2 or 3 months to see the tree change at all. If you want to see the tree grow, you'd have to watch it for years. You ever go back to a neighborhood you grew up in and the trees were small when you left, and you go back 10 or 20 years later, now the trees are gigantic? That's what wisdom is. Wisdom is reliable. Wisdom is steady. Wisdom is faithful. You know what the most impressive trees in the world are? Sequoias and redwoods. They grow in the coastal regions of the Northwest in the United States. There are groves of redwood trees, and arborists estimate that there are redwood trees in the groves in Muir Woods in Northern California that are 2,500 years old. There's a sequoia tree in Sequoia National Forest that's called the General Sherman tree. And arborists estimate that it is 275 feet tall. Its girth at the surface is 102 feet. They estimate that the weight of the General Sherman tree is 2.7 million pounds, and they believe that the General Sherman tree is 3,250 years old. Think about that. Think about that. That tree was alive when Solomon was alive. When Solomon was writing the book of Proverbs, that tree was already a couple hundred years old. It was a tree that probably, according to arborists, it grows most rapidly in the first 100 to 200 years of its life. It was probably 10 to 12 feet tall already. By the time that Jesus walked on the earth, the tree was over 1,000 years old. The tree was probably already 150 feet tall. By the time of the Declaration of Independence and the birth of the United States, the tree was probably over 200 feet tall. Can you imagine how many storms that tree has endured? How many droughts, how many floods, how many fires have raged around its base? How many insects have tried to infect it and not succeeded? What has that tree endured? It's that endurance. It's that perseverance. It's that reliability. That's where we see wisdom. We see wisdom in faithfulness. We see wisdom in these things. We see wisdom in experience. We see wisdom in the art of compromise. We know wisdom when we see it in perseverance and faithfulness and reliability. We can see it and we can seek it. Proverbs chapter 3 tells us that blessed are those who find wisdom. Those who gain something they didn't have, understanding. For she, wisdom, is more profitable than silver. It gives us a better return on our investment, on our search, on our time, than even gold. Wisdom is more precious than rubies. Nothing we can long for, nothing we can desire, nothing we can lust for, nothing we can pursue compares with wisdom. And long life is in wisdom's right hand, and in her left hand are riches and honor. All the ways of wisdom are pleasant ways. And all her paths are peace. Wisdom is a tree of life. And to those who take hold of her, those who hold fast to wisdom will be blessed. See, I think James P. Carson, Simon Sinek were on to something. But they didn't invent anything. They just tapped into an ancient wisdom when they speculated that the world that we live in is not defined by finite games, but life is an infinite game. And the way that we win in life is by staying in the game. Because you see, wisdom is not a thing. Wisdom is a process. Wisdom is a pursuit. Wisdom is true north. And if we pursue it, if we pursue wisdom, if we seek it, we will know it when we see it. Proverbs chapter 3 teaches us that by mentoring, by investing in others, and others investing in us, we can find wisdom, because mentoring is winning. And sacrificing is winning when we live heroically, when we live to make the lives of others better, when we sacrifice for our own sake, for the sake of others. That's winning. It's winning when we are trusting in others, trusting in ourselves, most of all, trusting in God. Living is winning. Living is when we don't back down, when we don't go quietly into that good night, when we grab life by the shoulders and we shake it for all it's worth. It means being fully present, fully alive. Living is winning, and giving is winning. It is winning for us to be generous with our time, and our talent, and our treasure, to be good stewards of every moment. And surrendering is winning, knowing the difference between those things that we can control and those things that we can't. But I believe that we could have a list that could go on for days, probably thousands of things that are part of the infinite game of the journey toward wisdom. But ultimately, I believe that all of these things are encased in the one idea, that winning in the infinite game is pursuing wisdom, because wisdom is winning. Solomon knew this because he had the gift of wisdom. God, I believe, answered his prayer. Now you may wonder, is this a mythological tale about Solomon's dream and God granting him a wish? But Solomon was a real person. Archaeologically, historically, we know that King Solomon was the third king of Israel after Saul and David from 971 BC to 931 BC. Solomon was the king of Israel. And traditionally, he was the wisest of all of the kings of Israel. And we know that Solomon is credited with being the editor or the author of 3 books that are preserved in our Bibles. One of them is the book of Proverbs. Another one is the Song of Solomon, his reflections on the nature of true love. And the third one is the book that he edited or wrote at the end of his life. It's a book called Ecclesiastes, Reflections of a Wise Life. And at the end of the book, in the final verses of Ecclesiastes, in Ecclesiastes chapter 12, Solomon describes himself in the third person as the teacher. And he says this: not only was the teacher wise, but he also imparted knowledge to the people. He pondered and searched out and set in order many proverbs. The teacher searched to find just the right words, and what he wrote was upright and true. And then he comes to this conclusion. Now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments. For this is the duty, this is the destiny, this is the pursuit of all mankind. When I was a kid, I got over the Sears wish book probably when I was 10 or 11 years old. I realized the stuff I really wanted wasn't in the Sears Christmas catalog. But I pondered this whole idea of Aladdin's lamp for a long time. I still messed with it for a lot of years. But there was some place in my teen years I cracked the code on it. I know what to wish for. If a genie ever comes to me, if I ever find a magic lamp and I rub it and a genie pops out and it's Robin Williams and he says, you have 3 wishes, I know what you want to wish for. This is it. If this ever happens to you, this is what you wish for. When the genie comes out and says, I will grant you 3 wishes, the first thing you wish for is more wishes. You crack the code on it. What will you wish for? I wish for infinite wishes. Deal with it, genie. But what happened to me in my 20s was I stopped wishing for things and I started setting goals. And I remember when I was in college, I had 3 goals. First goal was to be a star athlete. Second goal was to drive a cool car. And the third goal was to have a cute girlfriend. I can tell you 40 years later, I married the cute girlfriend, and I had the cool car, but it was a piece of crap. It was a 1976 Triumph TR6, and it was broke down as much as it ran. So it ran for 8 hours, and you had to fix it for 8 hours, but I was cool. And there was a day in my 30s, it took into my 30s, when I was running marathons. The Dallas White Rock Marathon was in Dallas, and I asked my wife if she could bring the girls down. And the last 100 yards was in front of City Hall. And I had this dream that I could be the star athlete at the finish of the marathon if my 3 young girls would come out and run the 100 yards to the finish. And that happened. So I was a star athlete, at least in the eyes of 3 little girls. And that was good for me. But does that mean I was done? See, that's the beauty of seeking wisdom. It's not a thing. Why would you waste your desire wishing for a thing when what you can wish for is a journey, a quest, an adventure with wisdom as your true north? And I know where that journey starts. And the journey can start here, today. Psalm 111 tells us where the journey, the pursuit of wisdom starts. Psalm 111 says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of the search, the beginning of the journey, the beginning of the quest, beginning of seeking wisdom. Honoring God, pleasing God, being in awe of God is where it begins. And this is where we can begin, even today. So I'd ask you the question that I asked you when we began. What do you wish